Okay, everyone, we're going to get going in a minute or two, just to give you an opportunity to settle in. So if I can just ask everyone to please turn off your phones or put them on silent. And thanks for your patience. We're just having a bit of trouble with the tech side, and so I wanted to give people more time to come in. All right, greetings, everyone. My name is Malcolm Steinberg. I use the pronouns he and him. I'm a member of the Faculty of Health Sciences at SFU, and on behalf of my co-organizers of tonight's event, Travis Solway, who's a colleague from Health Sciences, Adal Iskander, a colleague from the Center for Comparative Muslim Studies, and Kendra Strauss, a colleague from Labor Studies, I welcome you here tonight in joining us on these cherished, stolen, and unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples. This event is co-sponsored by the Faculty of Health Sciences, the Center for Comparative Muslim Studies, the Morgan Labour Project in the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, the Schools for International Studies and Communication, and the Institute for Humanities, all from Simon Fraser University. We are very grateful, and I'd like to say this at the outset, for the image on the poster for this event, which has been provided by the Al-Madoun family with a request to amplify the work of Mahmoud Al-Madoun, who started a soup kitchen in northern Gaza, supported by his older brother Hani, who is living in Virginia, who explained in an NBC interview that the mainstay of the soup is often the ground corn and grain meant for pigeons and rabbits. This soup kitchen sustains up to 3,000 people daily and is a testament to the tremendous resilience and community solidarity of the Gazan communities. The kitchen is funded largely by online donations, and we encourage you to support Mahmoud and his efforts, and we have a QR code there for you to link into. Tonight, we will bring a sharp focus to the impact of the relentless, cruel, and dehumanizing onslaught in Gaza on Palestinian health and well-being, and hope to move all of us to greater action in bringing this genocide to a halt. We do so cognizant that our attention has been momentarily diverted from Gaza, from the events over the last few days. But we hope that this event will allow us to refocus our activity, our actions on bringing this inhumanity to an end. I will pause my opening remarks here before introducing our speakers to you in turn to ask Celia Joseph and Jada Gabriel Pape to situate our events on these ancestral Indigenous lands and to take this opportunity to embrace teachings from and to draw linkages and find solidarity between the oppressed people in Palestine and the Indigenous people in Canada. Celia Joseph is a Squamish and Snonaik-Mukh, British and Jewish. She is a graduate of the First Nations and Indigenous Studies program at UBC and cares deeply about decolonial and intersectional approaches to learning and caring for one another. Celia is the executive director of the Snetchin Foundation, a Squamish non-profit focused on language revitalization and immersion-based learning. She's also a part owner of Host Consulting, Inc., which is a Musqueam Squamish Tsweletheuth consultancy focusing on public heart and decolonial dialogues. Jada Gabriel Pape is a Coast Salish from the Sanish and Snonaimuk nations on Vancouver Island. She's passionate about creating safer spaces for all people, healthy and direct communication, and decolonizing. She has been working with rural and remote Indigenous peoples and communities for more than 28 years, including environmental organizations, municipalities, school boards, hospitals, and prisons. Her anti-oppression and anti-racism work is birthed out of traditional and wise teachings brought forward from elders, knowledge keepers, community members, and mentors. She holds a master's from UBC and is also a certified professional counselor who specializes in trauma and grief, and a college instructor at the Justice Institute of BC, and a filmmaker, a mixed media painter, and a single mother to a fantastic 16-year-old daughter. It's my pleasure to ask Celia to provide us with an acknowledgement.
Hatsquile eochtnoyap, Celia Joseph Quiansnas to he elo Quiankoshamin, Floyd Joseph, Squataquampton Siem, Llanman, Eve Joseph, Lanchisha, Larry Joseph, Squataquampton Siemt, Eamon, Rose Thomas, Lan Altach, Tanachin Tlastopmis, Ohumeo, Wetlamot 80, Kamkamlai. Kai Achton took nam eoch ta ahmasquium to slewit ol thetis quote mistalmoch, eoch ta swahamchet. Slates quins, sot Kai Achton took nam eoch to noyap, quiz nam 80, t took nut. Quin miles chuan eoch ta stalmoch, eoch ta manman, not qua Gaza, eoch squile. On Haman squallowin, eoch squile. Wet. Talt nawas eoch ta snawiath took nam ta Palestinian stalmoch eoch squile. Hello, everybody. My name is Celia Joseph. My ancestral name is Tehe Elot. I come from the village of Stotmas in the Squamish Valley at the foot of the Chief. That's where my father, Squataquampton Siem, holds his hereditary chieftainship. And my father is a carver, and he's Squamish and Snanemoch from the island, which is what ties me to my cousin sitting over there in the beautiful hat. My cousin who asked me to come here tonight, who's asked me to come to many events, and I always try and make it when I can, and I'm always humbled to be in her presence because she is omnipresent and somehow everywhere at all times. My mother's Eve Joseph. She's a writer, a poet. She was also a former hospice social worker, so she's in the health field herself for about 20 years. And she's British, Ashkenazi, and Sephardic Jewish. So, as I mentioned, I've been asked to come open several events or marches or talks in solidarity with Palestine 6 months now, and I don't want to do it anymore in this way. I don't want to have to grieve with you all anymore. But I'm
so sorry, is there a medic? I'm so sorry, but is there a medic?
Oh my gosh. She's just asking for a medic over in the front center. Pardon? Pardon? Okay. Okay, somebody's calling 911. There's also a midwife at the front, too. I don't know if that we could send her up. Oh. Do you think you should go? Maybe go. I'll just wait for people to be able to take their seats again, but at your own pace here. Two midwives. Yeah, two midwives and doctors. Well, I certainly had it in my mind when I sat down that I wanted to offer a prayer, so now I definitely will. But in this case, prayers for life also, which are the prayers that we always have to accompany with our prayers for grief and our prayers for rage and our prayers for something different, for better futures. But what I was wanting to say was, in October, when I was first called to speak, I really thought to myself, oh my God, like, who am I? What are the words? How do you chime in? And but in Salish teachings, when somebody reaches out to you and they ask you to do something in a vein of ceremony, we don't say no, we show up. And also, as part of our governance systems, as part of how we tell stories and record histories and pass down who we are as Stalmoch, as Chotmish and Snanemoch people from generation to generation, as we call witnesses. If you've ever been to a Salish ceremony, you'll hear the speaker who has a robe across their chest and a headband across their head, and they'll be calling out the names of the people present and asking them to witness what was happening today. And at the end of the ceremony, you have witness speakers who, when you're called as a witness, you are really paying attention to everything that's happening, because you might get called at the end to speak. And if you get called at the end, you stand up and you do the best you can, and that's what I'm doing. And for the last 6 months, I've been witnessing. I've been waiting, taking down every detail that I can, so that if I get asked to speak, I'll do the best I can. And here I am. As a Chotmish person in my ancestral territory who grapples with generations of intergenerational trauma and strength, and myself made a career of language revitalization as a result of colonialism. I have watched for so many social movements as Palestinian people have shown up for us. And I've watched the people that I've loved and respected, like the late Lee Miracle, show up for Palestinian people. And I watched and read the people that I was learning to create my own politic from talk about Palestinian liberation. So I've been a student to the impact of the people of Palestine on some of the greatest minds for a long time. And now we've come to a place where Palestinian people have held up a mirror to the world. They've held up a mirror and they've asked us to look at ourselves. As Native people, they've asked us to look at our own movements of decolonization, to look at ourselves and what we've asked for. They've taught us to ask for more. They've taught us to be literal in what we ask for, that decolonization is literal, it's not a metaphor. Palestinians have held a mirror up to every single facet of society, to our healthcare system, to our legal system. They've held a mirror up certainly within our through journalism and media. They've had us all take a look at ourselves. They've had us all take a look at the structures that we thought we knew, and we are watching what we thought we knew about our society, crumble in front of us because of the bravery and the authenticity of the Palestinian people. And so when I think about witnessing, I think about how important it is to be paying such close attention, to be the collective memory, to know that as the colony of Israel, the state of Israel, as they bomb archives. I saw today a headline about bombing a fertility center. As they try and bomb futures, as they try and bomb memory, I I want you to hold on to this concept of witnessing, because after 150 years of colonization for my own people, it's witnessing that has kept us true to who we are. And it's that same principle of being attentive and really learning to watch with open eyes and critical ears, that we can all do this together to create an honest memory of what we're seeing, and to hold that mirror up to ourselves to learn how to do better, learn how to do more, and insist on better futures for all of us, for all of our kids. Because what we know is that these mirrors that Palestinian people are holding up are for all of our children, all of our futures. They are demanding a future for themselves that our future, my daughter Alayla's future, Thomas here, is reliant on. So I just wanted to hold on to the concept of witnessing, because from my own people, even though our struggles are so different, I just know there's certain things that people can't touch, no matter how hard they try. And that the more people that stand and gather with Palestinian folks, just the harder it is for people to try and take what they can't touch. And I want to just, in closing, say that I've been on the university to talk about Palestine and my unwavering support here as a host nation in these territories, but by students, not by faculty. So I wanted to express my delight at that, but also how basic of a necessity that is, and that I wish it wasn't the anomaly for centers that are producing, that are supposed to be producing the critical minds of our country. It shouldn't be an anomaly to speak out against genocide. You shouldn't have to be afraid to speak up against genocide. And as my two midwife friends, my best friend Keisha and Heba, walked down the stairs, they actually asked me to put together a presentation for midwives around why what's happening in Palestine is an issue that everyone ought to care about. And through a health lens, I just think that lens is so important, particularly around healthcare, around a Hippocratic oath that doesn't see race, that doesn't see those, that isn't supposed to see those barriers. But again, that mirror, right? The mirror that the Palestinian people are holding up to the world to make us look at ourselves, to make us know what systems have to crumble so that we can rebuild better. So I just want to raise my hands to everybody for coming. Coast Salish people say at our gatherings, you could have been anywhere tonight, but you chose to be here. And time is such a valuable commodity, and the Palestinian people are where so much of our time needs to be going. And I just want to raise my hands to all of our speakers. And I will just end by saying a prayer. So I'll just get everybody to stand if you can. And I want to, first of all, I want to pray to that pregnant person that was struggling. I just hope that they are safe and that their baby's safe, and they had it in their heart to come tonight. However far along they were, as a former pregnant person, it's hard getting from A to B, and I really see that dedication. But I just want to explain before I start my prayer that that prayer can look very differently for other people. So you can pray however it is that you pray. But if prayer isn't something that you're used to, then I'm asking people to hold the people of Gaza, the Palestinian people in the diaspora, and particularly in their occupied homelands and territories in their hearts. And for me, really, I can't stop thinking about that playground that's been in the news. As a mom of a toddler who goes to a playground every day, that's what's really in my heart today, and I just wanted to say that out loud. I didn't bring a drum or a rattle, but I really had it in me today that I'd like to offer a song for prayer. And just hopefully what you can do is look around and see these people who care and who are wanting the same future that you are. And it feels a lot less lonely and a lot less defeating when you stand with the people who move you, the people that you can walk with, that see your humanity and that you can feel safe around. So this is a prayer song by Ray Natrero Siem, Chief Sesiem Ray Natrero. It was gifted to my family, the Joseph family. It's a Thunderbird song. I just want to reiterate that in Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish territory, the Palestinian people are always welcome. Tamatequetsi and Snachum.
Haichkasiem. Ietsap Oeliel, Siaya, Siem, Sialachwa, Ich Imichne Eten, Tanatchat Tla, Husetnich East, Nonemoch O Homeoch, Antha Jada Gabriel Pape, Antha U Wasalwat, Heights Upka Eat Skopmish, the Musqueam Eat Tsleil-Waututh, Mestimoch. Aitanash Olawan, Mestimoch Palestinian. My name is Jada Gabriel Pape, and I come from the Husetnich and Snuneymuxw nations on Vancouver Island. I live here on these occupied homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people and their ancestors. I have family ties to both Musqueam and Squamish. I could just stop and just what she said, just go like that. And it strikes me that there is no more to say. We've been talking for 6 months. We've been witnessing. We've been shattered over and over for 6 months. And so one of the things that I do is I have no idea what I'm going to say. I just, whatever falls out of my face is what comes out. And it usually comes from here, which is what our cultural training teaches us, is to speak from your heart and you'll say the right thing. It will be honest, it will be true, it will be correct. I took myself for a walk today because I needed to settle my nervous system. which is something I think we all need to do right now, is every day return to our bodies, return to a practice that brings us home in a way, home within ourselves. And my nervous system has been exceptionally frazzled the last week after receiving death threats and being stalked and having my child targeted by a Zionist. And I think it might be the biggest Zionist fail there ever was, that at the end of being afraid, undeniably afraid, and upping safety and upping security for myself and my child, I felt like actually the takeaway wasn't the danger I was in, and it wasn't the danger my child is in. It's actually that I had so many people rally and come into the foreground and work to advocate and protect and demonstrate care and love. And it is what the deepest reciprocity looks like, is when we do something unconditionally. My solidarity with Palestine and with Palestinians is unwavering, and it is unconditional. We are, as my cousin said, 150 years into our own genocide. That many of us spoke at one event and one person received death threats and threats of sexual violence, and that happened to be the Indigenous person, is no coincidence. It is actually what colonialism teaches, is that we are not human, is that we are not valued, and that we are direct targets. So in the settling of my nervous system, I don't really take my dogs for a walk. They kind of take me for a little drag around the neighborhood. One of the things that happened for me is at the end of my walk, sort of at the tail end of an hour, which seems to be the sacred number for me. It's the 1 hour mark when I recognize what is that deep, profound place of knowing. And what I realized an hour into this walk is that the reason we can come together, the reason I can offer a teaching, the reason I can return to myself is because of the generous spirit of my ancestors. It's that same generous spirit that actually allowed for colonialism to take a foothold here and to do the violence it's done for 150 years. It's that same generous spirit of the people of Palestine that has allowed for the Zionist regime to take hold. It is actually the generosity of people that I choose to focus on. And in the settling of my nervous system, there is song, there is prayer, there's walking dogs. But I found some teachers in other places. And one of the places that I have returned to over and over, as Malcolm said, I have an art practice, and so I'm a long-time painter and bead worker. And in meeting many new Palestinian kin through this horrifying time of a genocide, one of the things that I could offer is to open my home as a place to come together and talk and be and teach each other and to be safe, to be held and cared for. So for quite a while, for quite a few months, we've been working together, a little Indigenous cohort and a little Palestinian cohort. And we would get together once a week and we would do beading and talk about what are the teachings of the beads, how every bead that's nestled next to another bead is actually like our people, that we sit together, we don't crowd each other, there is a teaching there, that we stay connected, we're in alignment, and together we all have an ugly phase where the beading piece doesn't look so good. We're like that as people, we have ugly phases, but we stick with it, and in the end it's beautiful. We stick together. We follow each other's by color, by pattern, by repetition. We show up again and again, and it's beautiful. We moved through beading and sharing teachings, and then we moved into tatreez, which is, for people who don't know, it's Palestinian embroidery. And like blown away because it's nothing. I was like, I can do this because it's nothing new. It's just little things, just like beads. I can totally do this. It's nothing like beadwork. It's totally, totally different. And Tatriz offered all kinds of new teachings. And some of those teachings are that it is with the structure, it is with the repetition that we understand that those patterns carry very specific recognition of village sites, of places, of ancestral knowledge and teachings and memories. And also the patience of learning something new. So I'm almost 53, and I'm really happy that I'm almost 53 and am still willing to sit down and be very humbled and learn something. I'm very, very happy that at almost 53, that I don't have to be a one-trick pony. I can know lots of different things and remain nimble and flexible. And Tatriz actually offered that to me most recently, that you're going to do this thing, you're not going to be very good at it, you should stick with it because there's something here for you. So I just kept sitting with it, and I had to ask for help, and I had to take my time in a very different way. And I actually had to go inwards. So the design that I chose for my first Tatriz was a star. And I chose the star because selfishly I recognized it. It looked like what we do as Cholmoch, as Indigenous people, we do star blanket designs. And I recognized the star. And I was like, I can totally do that. So I sat with that. And then I had to choose my colors. And within the star pattern, there's these little tiny, they look like a plus sign, which is something we also use in our designs. And so my friend Rawan taught me that those plus signs they're the sparkle in the star. So one night we were sitting together and we were working on Tatriz, and as I was sitting with it, I said, how many times do you think somebody had to do this design to make it regional, to make it specific to that place? And she said, yeah, and how many times did someone have to look at the sky to see the sparkles, to put them there? And then we both had this like, wait, are people in Palestine, are they looking at the same stars as us? And if there's anybody here who knows the answer, please be quiet because I still don't know it. And I'm not even embarrassed about that. It's just how it goes. We're like the way the world spins and the sky, I don't know. So I'm one of those people that learns by doing. So I will know the answer to that when Palestine is free and when we are there together and we are rebuilding, inshallah. It feels, you said I got 15 minutes. That wasn't 15 minutes. Malcolm, sit down. People. It feels important to recognize in these times that we're trying to figure out, how do we sustain this? How do we continue to do this? And the last week has been very stressful, with being targeted. And that is not my biggest takeaway. My biggest takeaway is break the patterns of silence and isolation. That is where our liberation is. A younger version of me would have given in to being afraid and would have sat back and would have remained isolated. A younger version of me would not have reached out because I wouldn't have wanted to burden people and because I would have been embarrassed and ashamed that this had happened, that this was done to me. That at a younger age, I might have even thought that I had created this because I spoke up in an unruly way, that I didn't behave like a dignified Westerner, that actually I broke protocol, I broke a social agreement in raising my voice in council chambers. A younger version of me might have stopped there. But at this age, I chose to break those patterns and to reach out, and that's where the safety is. So in these times when we are afraid to speak out for Palestine, it's actually important that we find our people, that we remain more connected, and that actually we use our collective voice. It is fundamental to our survival as humans. It is fundamental to our survival for our humanity that we have to raise our voices. We have to speak out of turn because the gaslighting is never ending. You know, part of what is happening in universities is happening in every institution, that there is a denial of what is right in front of us. And so we need to be with our people. We need to remain connected. And that can happen in a lot of different ways. It can happen through very small gestures. It can happen through very small activities. But I know that the resistance for my people, the reason we're still here, is because we continued to sit down and live in the practices that soothed our nervous system, that taught our children, and that made it so that we're not alone, that we're not isolated. And actually, that's the piece to focus on, is how do we get out of the isolation of this? And so it's using the tools of gathering, using whatever the superpowers that each of us has, and recognizing that there will be moments where it feels very sticky and very uncomfortable. And actually, part of the reason as Hualmoch, as people who belong to these lands, part of the reason we are so in right relationship with people who are Palestinian is because we see our experience in their experience. Every single thing that we are witnessing as happening in Gaza and the West Bank, every single thing has happened here to our people. It was not televised, but it happened. The crimes against children, the crimes against women, the crimes against elders, the crimes against men and little boys, the dehumanization, the slaughtering of animals, all of that has happened here. And we have to remember that. We can't walk around the streets and just see that this is a beautiful place. We actually have to find out the story and tell the story. That's what we have to normalize. Or we're perilously close to thinking that when Gaza, at the end of this genocide, that people will do trite land acknowledgements and territorial acknowledgements without telling the story. For so many years, our people were silenced. We were not put in the foreground. And our stories were made so uncomfortable that people wouldn't tell them. And then we started the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. That was done by people who had survived residential school. They led that. That was a group of people breaking silence. That was a group of people saying, I won't carry this shame as mine. This was done to us. We did not deserve this. We did not make this happen. There are so many parallels between Palestine and here. So those woven threads that come together, if you have a practice that can bring you home to your well-being, home to your body, soothing your nervous system, find it. If as a child you loved drawing circles, go draw circles, draw overlapping circles, find patterns, do repetition, return to your body so you can be sustained. Let yourself daydream for a future and do it in your body, because actually the first weapon of colonialism is to remove us from ourselves. Once we're disconnected from our own hearts, we can tolerate anything. So we actually, for our well-being and for the future of Palestine, for the future of humanity, we have to learn to withstand the tension, and we have to internalize our own well-being. We have to do that. And so find the practice. Return to something that sometime in your life soothed you. Bring it back. Don't let it be a thing of the past. Let it be your guide into the future. It's the only way these conversations can continue. Our well-being depends on it. Ocean.
thank you both for your plea to us to bear witness, and thank you for your teachings. As organizers of tonight's event, we are well aware that war is well recognized as a macro-level structural determinant of health. Besides the obvious consequences of war on mortality and the not sufficiently recognized fact that the mortality impacts of most wars are on civilians, war impacts on morbidity, both at a physical and psychological level. War displaces populations, violates human rights, causes environmental destruction, diverts human and financial resources, destroys schools and educational infrastructure and places of worship and cemeteries. And the focus tonight destroys health systems and supporting infrastructure. But this war, this onslaught on the Gazan population is of a scale and intensity that is unprecedented and dehumanizing. For us, it is clear that the intention is to make Gaza uninhabitable. And so this event aims to answer the question, what are the short, medium, and long-term impacts of the crisis in Gaza on the health and well-being of Palestinian people? And we begin by asking Dr. Kendra Strauss to provide us with some context for what we are witnessing. Dr. Strauss is a feminist economic and labor geographer who has published widely on paid and unpaid work, care labor, social reproduction, and geographies of labor regulation. She is professor in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology at Simon Fraser University, where she is the director of the Labor Studies program and associate member of the Department of Geography. She is also an editor, Human Geography, for the Annals of the American Association of Geographers.
Thank you, Malcolm. And thank you, Celia and Jada. As academics, we're taught to speak from the head and seldom from the heart, which is why my comments are written down. But I'm going to try and do a bit of both. So as Malcolm mentioned, I speak today as the director of the Labor Studies program at SFU, a co-sponsor of this event, and as a researcher of care and care work. It's an honor to say a few words alongside my fellow panelists whose expertise and experience in the struggles for justice and freedom for Palestine and Palestinian health workers far exceeds my own and is an inspiration to me. In other words, I feel like a little bit of an imposter up here. I'm not a health worker or a health researcher myself, but my remarks are intended to provide some context, which many of us know, but which needs to be spoken, for the genocide in Gaza and the intentional targeting of the healthcare system and healthcare workers there. In this sense, it's important to start with the history of the Zionist project in Palestine. This history will be familiar to many in this room, and yet is almost never acknowledged by our politicians, by the mainstream media, by the mainstream medical establishment, or by our university administrators. The invisibilization of this history enables their refusals to name and condemn the genocide in Gaza, the ethnic cleansing in the West Bank, and Israeli apartheid. It's important that we speak this history even in its most condensed and simplified form. That the fall of the Ottoman Empire after World War I led to the rule of Palestine by yet another empire, the British. That the 19th century birth of Zionism, as a movement and a political ideology focused on the creation of a Jewish ethno-state in Palestine, was fundamentally, in the words of its leader, Theodore Herzl, something colonial. And that the settler colonial project, enabled by the British Empire's mandate in Palestine, required for its realization the ethnic cleansing and mass expulsion of the thriving and diverse Palestinian population, including Palestinian Jews, that closely followed the unilateral Zionist declaration of the State of Israel. By 1948, around 800,000 Palestinians, or around 80% of the population, had been ethnically cleansed. And between 1947 and 1949, about 15,000 Palestinians were killed in mass atrocities and massacres. Since the Nakba and prior to October 7th, 6 million Palestinians were living in refugee camps throughout Palestine and in neighboring countries. And those in Palestine, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, live under military rule by Israel that Human Rights Watch, among many others, has labeled the crimes against humanity of apartheid and persecution. A key dimension of the regime of apartheid and the legal system that supports it is the arrest and arbitrary detention or mass incarceration of Palestinian people. And I speak this especially today because today is Palestinian Prisoners' Day. Before October 7th, Al Jazeera reported around 5,200 Palestinians, including children, were captive in Israeli jails. Now, an estimated 9,100 are officially detained, and thousands more adults and children have reportedly been detained by the Israeli army, tortured and interrogated in makeshift prisons across Gaza outside of any legal or civilian oversight. The escalation of arbitrary detention and the abuse, starvation, and torture of prisoners affect both Gaza and the West Bank, where more than 7,000 people have been arrested since October. In these recent and longer histories, we see plainly why settler colonial and imperialist states, including Canada, the USA, Britain, and Germany, support and enable economically, politically, and militarily Israel's occupation and ethnic cleansing of Palestine. We see why Germany, the nation state that perpetrated the Holocaust, forcibly shut down the Palestine Congress in Berlin last week. I'm sure many of you saw the coverage of this. Banned the Palestinian British surgeon Ghassan Abu Sita from entering the country, and cut off the words of Palestinian researcher Salman Abu Sita as he said, "We have never before seen all means of life systematically destroyed. Hospitals, clinics, schools, universities, libraries, ancient monuments, mosques, churches, universities, cemeteries, bakeries, apartment," and he was silenced. Silencing and attempted erasure, a land without a people for a people without a land, is the Zionist iteration of terra nullius, which solves the problem of European anti-Semitism through its territorial displacement, while securing, of course, the West's influence and interests in Palestine. Apartheid regimes, including in South Africa, learned from the settler colonial regime in this country we now call Canada. The dehumanization of Palestinians today and historically follows the violent logics of white supremacy and ethno-nationalism that legitimize borders and cages. It is from this context that the razing of Gaza, the genocidal intent of the State of Israel, expressed clearly in the statements of its own officials, broadcast live on social media, and so cogently and forcefully demonstrated in South Africa's case at the International Court of Justice, and the collective punishment of Palestinian people has played out before the eyes of the world. As Amar Azuz recently wrote, from the burning of books and libraries to destruction of museums and theaters, from bombing bridges to razing homes to the ground, erasure has become a weaponized tool to collectively punish people. In these processes of punishment, cities become battlefields. Tanks cut through people's streets and orchards to make space for invasions and destructions. Shops are vandalized by soldiers who want to destroy something more than a tiny shop. It is a destruction of a people, their livelihoods, their economy, their sense of identity and belonging. I would have written attempted destruction. The city is erased. The destruction and desecration, and I think here of Al-Shifa Hospital, of Gaza's healthcare infrastructure and the targeting and killing of healthcare workers has been a key feature, an intentional feature of this erasure. As of March 11th, Healthcare Workers Watch Palestine has reported at least 485 healthcare workers killed. There were over 1,000 attacks on healthcare delivery and healthcare workers. 311 healthcare workers have been arrested by the IOF, and their whereabouts are unknown. Only 12 of Gaza's 36 hospitals are even partially functioning. The Islamic University of Gaza Medical School has been destroyed, part of the campaign of scholasticide by Israel, alongside the only cancer treatment center in the Strip and Gaza's only pediatric cancer ward. Ambulances have faced attack, and an estimated 183 pregnant people give birth in Gaza every day without basic hygiene, necessities, fuel, water, anesthetic, drugs, blood products, and other supplies. As Malcolm said, healthcare access and quality is a social determinant of health. We learn, our students and those of us in the university learn a lot about social determinants of health, which are, according to the WHO, the non-medical factors that influence health outcomes. They are the conditions in which people are born, grow, work, live, and age. This is the direct definition of the WHO. And the wider set of forces and systems shaping the conditions of daily life and death. These forces and systems include economic policies and systems, development agendas, social norms, social policies, and political systems. Now, some critique the social determinants of health as a depoliticized framework for understanding health inequalities, highlighting instead the structural determinants of health which enshrine and encode structural racism, white supremacy, neoliberal capitalism, cis heteronormativity, and other forms of oppression and othering. And it is in Gaza that we see this relationship in horrifying relief. Destruction of a healthcare system is an act of genocide, as South Africa has argued. Once the healthcare system is destroyed, injuries and illnesses can't be treated, primary care cannot be delivered, chronic conditions cannot be managed. Public health systems, programs like immunization cannot be maintained and delivered, and famine cannot be managed. In other words, not only well-being, but the conditions of life become almost impossible to sustain. Azusa's very first sentence of Erased City is, "If it was not Palestine, it would be different. But it is Palestine." Silence. Silence is what our governments, our universities, our medical associations want in the face of the destruction of Gaza's physical and social healthcare infrastructures, which are conditions of life. Silence is what the claim that criticism of the Israeli state and its policies is anti-Semitic is intended to achieve. We cannot and will not be silent. Thank you.
Thank you, Kendra, for providing us with that context. We turn next to Dr. Yapenge to speak about his experiences of working in Gaza. And in doing so, we're very grateful to Janine Farrell, who's with us tonight from Health Workers Alliance for Palestine, for introducing us to both Dr. Gay and to Dr. Nala, our next speaker. Yapeng is a Chinese, Canadian, and first-generation immigrant. He's a family physician and resident physician in public health and preventative medicine. He received a Master's of Public Health degree in Health and Social Behavior at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, and he is a board member of the Canadian Public Health Association, Canadian Doctors for Medicare, and Humanity Auxilium. He's passionate about tackling health and social inequities by addressing the social and broader determinants of health, including anti-racism and decolonizing work and practice in medical education. Yapeng has worked for various global health organizations, including the World Health Organization, in the headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland, and the Population Health Research Institute in Hamilton, Ontario. In 2020, he was Canada's official youth delegate to the 73rd World Health Assembly and the 58th Pan-American Health Organization Directing Council. It's a pleasure to welcome you.
Thank you, Malcolm. I am very grateful and humbled to share time and space with all of you. I think there's a few things that I wanted to touch on, and hopefully I can stay within our time limit. I think it's important to position myself and how I show up for solidarity work. I'll also touch on anti-Palestinian racism, this climate of silencing and reprisal that we're seeing in academic institutions, workplaces, medical schools. And how do we continue to center the people of Palestine, the people of Gaza that are experiencing an ongoing genocide, experiencing the unimaginable horror of the crime of all crimes, the crime against humanity, the crime against our collective humanity. I, as was mentioned, am Chinese Canadian. I received this thing that is Canadian citizenship when I was in grade 5 because my parents passed a test. And had to move forward recognizing the privileges and the opportunities, but the obligation of what that carries, knowing the history of and the ongoing genocide of Indigenous peoples in Canada, to benefit from the graves of Indigenous children here on settler colonial land, so-called Canada. And I credit so much of my learning and unlearning to residential school survivors because unfortunately and fortunately it took until for me to get to undergraduate studies in Hamilton, which is very close to a place called Six Nations, learning from Haudenosaunee scholars and clinicians and community members about residential schools, about the 60s Scoop, and hearing and learning about the outcomes of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action and what it means to bear witness in that context, what it means to carry my identity as a Canadian that is complicit, and how do I lean into that discomfort of bearing witness, and how do I do that lifetime work and commitment and obligation and a commitment to dismantling these oppressive structural systems that dehumanize people that I care about, people that have taught me so much, then it becomes an obligation. And so for the past 10 years, I have been in this space of Indigenous health, primarily First Nations in the context of Hamilton and Six Nations, and Inuit in the context of Ottawa, Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory, because Inuit have been displaced from the north for medical apartheid reasons of being treated in the South, in Ottawa, and having worked in the context of Nunavut with Inuit. And it's from that experience, both as a clinician, but also from this understanding of what it means to work in public health, what it means to be a scholar and a practitioner of public health, to understand structural determinants of health at its core, what causes disease and suffering in this world, and that of the attainment of health and well-being is directly and fundamentally impacted by those structural determinants, including the impacts of colonization. And so when we can understand these things, we're better able to fundamentally address racial health inequities and social inequities. And I think being unable to talk about those things in the context of Palestine is not only horrific and appalling, but we leave out the fundamental analysis of being a practitioner in public health, that of what is the elephant in the room, what is the structural reasons for why Palestinian health, why are people dehumanized in this world. And it's from that framing that I had the opportunity to learn more about Zionist settler colonialism and its material manifestations on Palestinian bodies and people in occupied West Bank, in the Gaza Strip, in Israel proper, in the Palestinian diaspora around the world. And it became my privilege and opportunity to reckon with my own privilege yet again of being non-Palestinian and being able to learn about Palestinian health at an academic institution like Harvard University, and then also visit occupied West Bank and to visit places where my friends who are Palestinian do not even have the privilege to visit themselves, where their family have been exiled. And I've been thinking about how the ways in which I've been taught by my father and family members is we know where we come from. I think about how my father has brought me back to rural China in a place called Shandong, where he showed me the places that he grew up, he studied, and where our family has roots for generations. And how something so simple and straightforward is systematically denied, erased, stripped from people in this world, including First Nations, Inuit, Métis people in Canada, and Palestinian people in Palestine. And that is the framing in which I think more and more people are understanding the issue and the topic of Palestine. And now we're seeing people experience the worst forms of reprisals. I was immediately suspended without a conversation from the University of Ottawa's Faculty of Medicine, and immediately brought into a virtual meeting room with senior leadership of the Canadian Medical Association for my social media posts related to health and human rights for Palestine and Palestinians. And none of those accusations of unprofessionalism, of anti-Semitism, of inflammatory or hateful rhetoric stood the test of time. For doctors, for health professionals, for people that work in the space of caring for other human beings to label social media posts that stand for health and human rights for Palestine as anti-Semitic, as hateful, as inflammatory, in of itself is hateful and discriminatory. It is rooted in anti-Palestinian racism to dehumanize Palestinians and their narratives. And it is exactly this kind of rhetoric that has allowed this genocide to happen now for 6 months. It's interesting that an experience like that happened to me in November by the University of Ottawa and by the Canadian Medical Association to not even be considered bullying or harassment. And I was reflecting on how just a few days ago I was at the Governor General's residence in Rideau Hall, which was such a strange experience because this is the heart of Canadian colonialism. But who holds that post is an Inuit woman. And for her office to recognize what I went through in November as online abuse and racism and hate, I think was vindicating and spoke volumes as to how much we need to hold the complexities of what is happening in present day, this reality that doesn't seem like a reality I want to live in. But it's from that experience that I've been able to deepen my relationships and connections with people that care about me and support me, and connect with humanitarian healthcare workers who have been centering the people in Gaza. Because all of this anti-Palestinian racism, dehumanizing rhetoric is a distraction from what we should all be doing, is putting an end to the genocidal violence in Gaza that is rooted in the Zionist settler colonial project that started from the ongoing Nakba that began in 1948. And having visited Gaza and provided what I could provide as a primary care physician and bringing in medications and supplies, there's no other conclusion that I have than this being an ongoing genocide because of the systematic withholding of food, clean water, decent shelter, which over 2 million people in the Gaza Strip has been systematically denied. And the systematic targeting of healthcare infrastructure and healthcare workers is unprecedented. And I think we're kind of tired of hearing such a word. I think we're tired of hearing it in the context of this genocide. But the humanitarian healthcare workers that I've spent time with, who have worked in many other contexts, more so than I have, we've never seen anything like this, where the Israeli forces actually directly target hospitals, make them completely non-functional, and actually single out doctors and nurses in scrubs to detain them, arrest them, to execute them point blank in front of their patients because they refuse to leave their patients, because they refuse to leave their patients in the operating room because they're still operating on them, and they get shot. And so when this is happening to our healthcare workers in a different part of the world, and we're not able to speak about it in its actual terms, we lose our own humanity. And so I think we have to continue to do what we can when we are in the belly of the beast of these colonial projects, and recognize the immense privilege that we have to call out these atrocities, to recognize our power as people. When I think in this world, what these these systems and structures of oppression and racism and colonialism and imperialism, neoliberalism, tell us that we are powerless as people. But this is fundamentally not true when we look at any civil rights movement, any movement for self-determination and liberation in this world. It is hard fought. And to do everything that we can as individuals is something, but if we do it as communities of care that support and back each other, and to know that there's no taking out one person from said movement because it is a social movement, it is a collective, then we are more powerful than we could ever imagine. And so I am so humbled to share this time and space with you, and continue to center the people of Gaza. I'll end by sharing, because I do want to address, I think what we're talking about is like the short-term, medium-term, long-term impacts on health for Palestinians in Gaza. And it's so hard to talk about medium or long-term consequences when people continue to die every day from the bombs. It's hard to talk about the future. But the future, as Dr. Ghassan Abu Sita mentioned just a few days ago, is the future, and tomorrow is a Palestinian day. Because the people of Palestine will ultimately free themselves. We are the ones trapped. We are the ones trapped by these systems of silencing and fear of reprisal. And to recognize how do we decolonize health or healthcare or any kind of like fundamental shift in meaningful action towards decolonization, we have to decolonize ourselves first. We have to decolonize our own minds and how we actually show up properly in solidarity with Palestinian people that are struggling for their liberation and self-determination and basic human rights. Basic human rights. So I'll leave it there, I think.